Detective, do you know what it feels like to kill your father? That's not a line from a novel. That's what David Streer said, calmly, in the first 5 minutes of his police interview. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't crying, he was eating pretzels. This isn't just a murder story. It's the story of a decaying house, a decaying relationship, and the day it finally caved in. Welcome to the case, partner. I'm glad you're here. Today we're investigating what happened inside a cluttered home on Robinwood Avenue in Dayton, Ohio. What looks like a simple domestic homicide isn't. Because the killer didn't run. The killer cleaned the hallway. The killer waited for his mother. I need you with me on this one. The details are tangled. Mental illness, religion, OCD, old wounds. We're not just going to figure out what happened. We're going to figure out why it happened. This is the story of David Streer, a son who prayed every morning with his father, until one morning he snapped. Ready? Let's open the file. The 911 call came in at 10:48 a.m., February 9th, 2020. Nancy Kay, a family friend, was returning to the house with Becky Streer, David's mother. Becky had been away. Her husband, Donald, was supposed to be home, and her son, David, was there alone. When they pulled up, the house looked quiet, too quiet. And David, well, he just said, I think he stopped breathing. Nancy made the call. When responders arrived, they found the back door jammed, trash everywhere, old clothes, rotting papers, 2 feet of waste coating the floors. When they got to the bedroom, they found Donald, face up, blood at the mouth, body stiff, head and neck bruised. David, meanwhile, was outside, talking to police without handcuffs. Polite, cooperative, calm, almost too calm. Here's where I need your input, partner. What kind of person responds to a death in the family like that? Why didn't he run? Why didn't he lie? Was this guilt or something far more chilling? The belief that what he did made sense. In the next part of our investigation, we'll sit in the interrogation room with David. You'll hear exactly what he said, and we'll start piecing together the moments that led to his father's final breath. The first rule of interrogation is this: build rapport before you seek the truth. Detective Travis Abney understood this well. He didn't come in hot. He didn't accuse David of anything. He walked in with a bottle of water and a tone like he was asking about the weather. David, I'm Detective Abney. You can call me Travis. I'd shake your hand, but I've got a cold and I don't want to make you sick. David laughed. Just laughed. Like they were meeting at a church potluck. What followed was a strange, calm, deeply unsettling conversation. Abney started with the basics: name, age, height, weight. 30 years old, David said. About 6'3", maybe 360 pounds. He answered like he was filling out a DMV form. No emotion, no nerves. Then came the hobbies. I used to do genealogy, David said. I like tracking family history, but I haven't used a computer in 3 years. There was something off about that detail. 3 years without using a computer in 2020? That's not just rare. It's a red flag. Abney asked him if he had friends, a girlfriend, any pets. David said no to all of it. Slowly, Abney steered the conversation toward his father. How did the police get called today? David didn't hesitate. He stopped breathing yesterday, after we got into it. That's when the first real confession slipped out. We had a disagreement. We do a routine every day, morning prayers, some exercises. He didn't follow it, and he started itching. He had a skin infection. I didn't like that, so I hit him. Just like that, like he was talking about swatting a fly. The weapon? A metal broom, what David called a fuller brush. He admitted to hitting his father in the head, neck, and legs. He started apologizing, David said, saying stuff like he dreamed he was dying. I didn't believe him. I thought he was lying. This is when I want you to pause, partner, and ask yourself, is this the voice of a son or something else entirely? Because David wasn't just explaining his actions, he was justifying them. He said Donald had threatened him in the past. He said they had a long history of fighting. He said he didn't mean to kill him. And then, chillingly, he said it happened again. Did you get mad at him a second time? Yes. Why? Because of the prayer. And he said he saw dead people. He said he was dreaming that the fight wasn't real. That last part, that was the hook that got me. David didn't just get angry. He seemed threatened by his father's words. Like the idea of dying being just a dream felt like betrayal. He admitted to hitting him again, this time with his fists. I think I hit him in the face, and yes, I used the broom again. When asked how long it took for Donald to stop breathing, David said he wasn't sure. He claimed his father was squirming and yelling weird things, like he didn't know what was happening. David said he tried to help. He attempted CPR, but forgot the techniques. He didn't call 911 right away. Why? My phone wasn't with me, he said, and I didn't want to do something behind my mom's back. I was scared to be alone when the police came. Again, think about that, partner. He just killed his father, and his biggest concern? Not facing the cops without his mom there. When pressed further, David added another reason for not calling. I needed to clean the hallway so they could reach the room, and I had to clean myself. I had blood on me, and he had MRSA. That's right, he washed up, worried about catching an infection, before even thinking to get help. The medical term for this kind of mental detachment is flattened affect, a hallmark of trauma or severe mental illness. But even with that possibility, the facts are clear. He chose to wait 24 hours. He cleaned, he ate, he slept, and he only called his mom. When Abney asked him to write down his confession, David said, "Is this like a deposition?" "It's just a statement," Abney replied. "Just write what happened." Let's step back and look at what we know, partner. David admitted to hitting his father twice. He described the weapon. He explained his motive, routine disruption, and a disturbing conversation about death. He didn't flee, panic, or try to lie. He cleaned up the scene, not to cover his tracks, but to make it navigable. He called his mom, not emergency services. So now I ask you, is this the behavior of a cold-blooded killer? Or the unraveling of a mind that's been in survival mode for too long? In our next segment, we'll meet Becky Streeter, David's mother, the only person David trusted, and we'll learn why she had been living away from the family for weeks and what she knew about the long, tragic decay of the Streeter household. But for now, ask yourself this: would a son who murdered his father pack his mom a bag of snacks the day before? We've already heard David's side of the story, his confession, his strange detachment. But now it's time to meet the other pillar of the Streeter household, his mother, Becky. In this part of the case, we'll follow her interview with detectives. You'll see how complicated and heartbreaking this family really was. Because behind every violent act, there's often a slow-burning pattern of neglect, of mental illness, of the moments people didn't act when they should have. Let's get to it. Becky Streeter wasn't at home when Donald died. She'd been staying with her sister, partly to help her, partly to get away from her husband and son. It wasn't that she didn't love them, but after years of dysfunction, verbal abuse, and chaos, she had nothing left to give. Her words, not mine. "I already have enough on my plate. And my sisters. I told them they needed to figure it out on their own." When Detective Todd sat down with her, Becky looked tired, not just physically, emotionally depleted. She didn't seem shocked, not really. And when she recounted what happened that weekend, the timeline raised more questions than answers. "David called me on Saturday morning," she said. "He said they had a fight. He said he thought Dawn wasn't breathing. I told him to call someone. I got off the phone after 90 seconds so he could do that. But David didn't call. Instead, he cleaned, ate, slept, and Becky didn't follow up." Ask yourself this, partner. If someone calls you and says, "I think someone just died," what's your first move? Becky said she was focused on packing bags, bringing her laptop back home, doing taxes. She assumed David would figure it out. I knew he was scared, she said. I didn't want to push him over the edge. That statement is telling. It suggests that Becky knew David was unstable and had been for a long time. When she returned home on Sunday morning, she immediately noticed something was off. Both back doors were locked, and if Donald had gone out, only one lock would have been used. She stepped inside and found David. I asked him if he'd made the call. He said no. I told him I was going to. Nancy was with me. She made the call. Nancy K., the 911 caller, had driven Becky back to the house. She was sitting next to her when Becky made the decision to alert the police. A full 24 hours after David's first call, he said he was afraid and that he needed to clean the hallway so they wouldn't trip. Becky nodded, even smiled at that. You know, he was always worried about others getting hurt. This wasn't delusion, it was denial. Becky couldn't bring herself to fully accept what David had done. She was still operating in the language of family caretaking. He's just having a hard time. He's been under a lot of stress. He's a good boy. You've heard this before, haven't you? In other cases, in other families, when love mixes with trauma, the truth gets blurry. When detectives asked Becky why she didn't call the police from her sister's house as soon as David called her, she said, "It didn't occur to me. What would I say? I wasn't there. I didn't know what happened. Only David did." The detective pressed, "You didn't think to just alert someone?" Becky's answer, "I didn't want to make it worse." Partner, remember that line, because sometimes not wanting to make things worse makes them catastrophic. As the interview went on, more details emerged. David had ADHD, OCD, and was off his medication. His 2 former psychiatrists had both passed away. Becky had tried to get him evaluated again, but he refused. The house was in a state of advanced hoarding, a physical reflection of emotional damage. Becky herself admitted, "We're all mentally undone because of it." She also admitted that Donald had a history of abusive behavior toward both her and David. "He shoved me once, knocked me down. I called the police then, but it was years ago." The family had learned to survive by not reacting, by not escalating, by pretending the chaos was just a phase that would pass. But trauma doesn't go away quietly. It builds until one day someone snaps. Becky mentions something else, something that stopped me cold. The day she left for her sister's, just a few days before the murder, David had packed her a bag of snacks. "He wanted to make sure I had something to eat," she said. "It was so thoughtful." A son who was capable of violent rage, also capable of quiet care. It's easy to say people are monsters, but in cases like this, they're often just fractured human beings, doing the best they can with broken tools. Here's what I'm left wondering, partner. Could this have been prevented? Becky knew David was struggling. Donald had a history of aggression. The house was collapsing in on itself, literally and emotionally. Yet no one acted until it was too late. And even now, Becky seems more sad than angry, like she's lost 2 people, one to death and one to prison, and doesn't know how to mourn either of them. So now I turn to you. What do you see here? A family crushed by years of dysfunction, a mother who looked away for too long, a system that failed to intervene. In the final chapter of our investigation, we'll explore what happened in court, how David pled, what sentence he received, and whether justice was truly served. But for now, think about the phone call that didn't happen, the locked door, the hall that got cleaned, not to hide the crime, but to make it easier for someone else to walk through. We've walked through the house, sat in on the interrogation, listened to a mother try to explain the unexplainable. Now we step into the courtroom, where the law meets psychology, where facts become verdicts. But here's the twist. This case never went to trial. There was no lengthy legal battle, no parade of expert witnesses or cross-examinations. Because David didn't fight the charges. He accepted what he'd done. And the justice system responded. Let's see how. November 2020, Montgomery County Common Pleas Court. By this point, David had already spent 9 months in county custody. He'd been evaluated by multiple mental health professionals. And while it was clear he was emotionally unwell, he was deemed competent to stand trial. The charge? Involuntary manslaughter. Why not second-degree murder or murder one? Because the facts were complicated. David didn't premeditate the killing. He didn't use a deadly weapon with lethal precision. There were no attempts to flee, hide evidence, or mislead investigators. In fact, he confessed within minutes, and he never once denied what he'd done. The prosecution knew a jury might view David more as a troubled man than a hardened killer. So they offered a plea, involuntary manslaughter, with a recommended sentence of 11 years in prison. David took it. In court, David appeared soft-spoken, emotionally flat, but cooperative. No dramatic outbursts. No apologies that sounded rehearsed. Just quiet acceptance. His mother, Becky, was in attendance. She didn't speak during the hearing, but later she would tell reporters she still loved her son and that she believed he never meant to kill his father. It was a tragic explosion, she said, a long time coming. The judge agreed to the plea deal, and with that, the case was closed. 11 years, no parole until 2031. David would be in his early 40s when he got out, if he made it that far. In prison, he was placed in a facility with access to mental health services, regular check-ins, medication evaluation, and that, officially, was the end. But unofficially, that's where you and I still have questions, don't we? Partner, let's pull back now. Let's leave the courthouse. Let's go back to that house on Robinwood Avenue, the one filled with clutter, with routines, with ghosts. Let's ask ourselves what really happened there. Because this wasn't just a crime of passion. It was the slow, silent failure of everyone and everything. A father who was abusive and volatile. A son who needed help but wouldn't seek it. A mother who loved them both but shut herself off to survive. A system that never caught up until it was too late. So who do we blame? Or better yet, what can we learn? This is the part of the story that matters most, the part no headline will give you. Because it forces us to ask, when do patterns become fate? How long can a family avoid the truth before it consumes them? And what do we owe to the people who live quietly on the edge of breaking, right in our neighborhoods? I'm not here to give you easy answers. I'm here to investigate with you. So now I turn to you one last time. If you were in that interrogation room, what would you have asked David? If you were in that courtroom, would 11 years feel like justice? And if you were Becky, a mother caught between love and responsibility, what would you have done differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one. And if you want to help me keep telling these stories, raw, reflective, and real, hit that subscribe button, because the world is full of unsolved mysteries, and I still need a partner.